Thank you for joining Wars of the Rosies. As we continue with part 2, Quetzalcoatl, from America's Assignment with Destiny by Manly P. Hall. The Adepts, America's Assignment with Destiny. Quetzalcoatl. Three great cultural heroes were associated with the origin of Mayan civilization. Votan, who founded the Votanic Empire, seated at Palanque, Itzama or Zamna, the Yucatecan hero, and Kulkulkan, whose worship extended throughout the Central American area. All three came from a remote region lying eastward, introduced arts and sciences, and founded religious cults or mysteries. From the legendary histories of these persons, they should be included as adepts or initiates of ancient secret schools, possibly Atlantean. In a book written in the Quichean language and attributed to Votan, the Great One declared himself a snake, a descendant of Imo of the line of Chan. He came to America by the command of God from a distant place. He ultimately founded Palanque and built a temple with many subterranean chambers, which was called the House of Darkness. Here he deposited the records of his nation in the keeping of certain aged men called guardians. There is a legend that this Votan was the grandson of Noah. The original book containing this report was in the possession of Nunix de la Viga, Bishop of Chiapas, but he destroyed it with the other native manuscripts which he was able to accumulate. Fortunately, however, it had been copied by Aguilera. From the Codex Dresden. Itzamna, the father of the Itzaz, the old god with elaborate headdress and cape, is seated at right and appears to be addressing a lesser deity who faces him at left. Itzamna, according to Koyu was a priest who came with the Margarets from the east. He was the son of the supreme deity, Hunab Q, or the Holy One. Itzamna is pictured as an ancient man with a very prominent and strangely shaped nose, either toothless or with one crooked fang. Likenesses of him have been found indicating his birth from a plant growing from the earth. He is always shown rising from the mouth of a serpent or a turtle, to symbolize that he came from the sea. He healed the sick and restored the dead to life. He lived to a great age, was said to have been buried at Itzama or Itzama, where his tombs became places of pilgrimages. Itzamna was sometimes called the skillful hand. After his death, his body was divided. His skillful hand was placed in one tomb, his heart in another, and the rest of his remains in a third. One of the best known of his emblems was a Tau or T-cross. It is now generally admitted that the Quetzalcoatl of the Nahuatl people, the Gucomats of the Quiches, and the Kulkulkan of the more southern Mayans were one person. In each language, the word signifies feathered, plumed, or winged serpent. This title may have resulted from Quetzalcoatl casting his lot among or gathering his first followers from the descendants of Votan. This tribal group had the serpent as its heraldic device. At a remote time, this semi-mystical, semi-divine priest initiate, Quetzalcoatl, came from the fabled land of the Seven Colors and established his right at Tula and Kalula. Quetzalcoatl was the initiate philosopher and teacher of the Nahuatl tribes of central Mexico. Among the appellations of this priest-prophet king are he who was born of the Virgin, Lord of the Winds, and the Da Vinci Incarnation. Quetzalcoatl was the son of the universal creator God and the Virgin Xochiquetzal, and his conception was made known by an ambassador from the god of the Milky Way, Corcomata. In his Indian monarchies, described a band of people who came from the north dressed in long black robes. Arriving at Tula, these strangers were well received, but finding the region already thickly populated, they continued to Cholula. These wanderers were great artists and skilled in working metals. Quetzalcoatl was their leader. Mendita, in his ecclesiastical history, describes Quetzalcoatl as a white man with a strong formation of body, broad forehead, large eyes, and a flowing beard. He wore a mitre on his head and was dressed in a long white robe reaching to his feet and covered with a design of red crosses. In his hand he held a sickle. His habits were ascetic. He never married and was most chaste and pure in his life, and is said to have endured penance in a neighboring mountain town, not for its effect upon him, but as an example to others. He condemned sacrifices, except of fruit or flowers, and was known as the god of peace. For when addressed on the subject of war, he is reported to have stopped his ears with his fingers. Fray Bernardino de Sahagún described Quetzalcoatl as very homely, with a long head and a very long beard. There was a recumbent statue of him in the temple at Tula, which was always covered with blankets. His vassals, writes the good Fray, were all workmen in the mechanical arts and skillful in cutting the green stones, called chetzahuitzes, also in the art of smelting silver and making other objects. All these arts had their origin and commencement with Quetzalcoatl, who had houses made with these precious green stones, called chetzahuitzes, and others made of silver, still others made of red and white shells, others all made of boards, and again others made of turquoise, and some all made of rich plumes. Quetzalcoatl also owned all the wealth of the world, in gold, silver, and the green stones, called chetzahuitzes, and other precious things, and had a great abundance of cocoa trees of different colors, which are called thus. The said vassals of Quetzalcoatl were also very wealthy and did not lack anything at all. They never suffered famine or lack of corn. They never ate even the small ears of corn, but rather heated their baths with them, using them instead of firewood. They also said that the Quetzalcoatl did penance by pricking his limbs and drawing blood, with which he stained the maguey points, that he bathed at midnight in a spring called the following. The interpreter of the Codex, Teleriano Remenses, said that Quetzalcoatl was created by the breath of Tenochtitlan. Quetzalcoatl was born on the day of 7 Cains, and disappeared or died on the day of 1 Cain. He was identified with the planet Venus. The Codex Vaticanus A says that the hero founded 4 temples, the first for the princes, the second for the people, the third the House of Fear or Serpents, and the fourth the Temple of Shame. The Codex Chimalpopoca says that Quetzalcoatl was born as a 9-year-old child. When he resolved to leave Mexico, he reached the shore, and, removing his clothing and his snake mask of turquoise, destroyed himself by fire. His ashes changed into birds, and his heart became the morning star. He remained 4 days in the underworld and 4 days as a corpse. After that, he ascended to heaven as a god. It is specifically mentioned by Sahagún that Quetzalcoatl created and built houses under the earth. Traces of subterranean grottos and rooms have been discovered in the vicinity of most of the architectural monuments of the Nahuas. There is a vast complex of such apartments near the Pyramid of the Sun at San Juan, Teotihuacan. The Amerindians believe the serpent to be an earth dweller, and it is quite possible that the accounts implied these subterranean and secret places to be chambers of initiation into the mysteries of the cult. According to D. Bourbourg, the Mexican demigod Votan made a journey through the subterranean passage, which, running underground, terminated at the root of heaven. This passage was a snake's hole, and Votan was mentioned because he was himself a son of the snake. Quetzalcoatl appeared as a great sorcerer, magician, or necromancer. He performed miracles, and upon his departure, his secrets were entrusted to an order of priests governed by a hierophant or master. This priesthood practiced the arts and sciences, treated the sick, administered sacraments, and were diviners and prophets. Landa gives some consideration to the activities of these religious orders. From Zayler's Codex, Vaticanus 3773. Quetzalcoatl as god of the wind and presiding deity over the region of the east. Lucien Biart summarizes the available data. The most contradictory ideas have been current in regard to this divinity, who, now considered of celestial origin, and now regarded as a man who had acquired the immortality of the gods, seems in reality to be a union of several personages. He certainly belonged to a race other than the one he civilized. But what was his country? He died, announcing that he would return at the head of white-faced men, and we have seen that the Indians believed his prophecy fulfilled when the Spaniards landed on their shore. According to Sahagun, the most unusual ornaments of the images of Quetzalcoatl were a mitre spotted like the skin of a tiger, and a short embroidered tunic, turquoise earrings, and a golden collar supporting fine shells. The legs of these images were in gaiters of tiger skins, and on their feet were black sandals. A shield hung from the left arm, and in the right hand was a scepter ornamented with precious stones, an emblem which terminated in a crook like a bishop's crozier. Quetzalcoatl is credited with the invention of the pictorial or hieroglyphic method of writing, and especially is his name associated with the Tanalamatl, or Book of Fate. This was more than a civil calendar, and was reserved for the calculation of human destiny and prophecies concerning the future of the state. It was used by master magicians, the chief of whom was an astrological adept credited with extraordinary occult powers. While it is likely that Quetzalcoatl brought the Tanalamatl back to Mexico after his long journey among the Mayans, a legend already advanced in such matters, the Aztec legend has been summarized by Mendita. The gods had created a man, Oxomoco, and a woman, Saipactanatl, as the progenitors of the human race. They dwelt in a cave at Cuernavaca, and in order to regulate their lives, these two resolved to devise a calendar. Saipactanatl felt that her descendant, Quetzalcoatl, should be invited to participate in the project, because she was the mother of all the living and a great prophetess. Saipactanatl was privileged to select and write the first sign or day sign of the calendar. The others followed until the 13 signs were completed. Sahagun, in his general history, gave a number of details of the struggle between Quetzalcoatl, the civilizer, and Tezcatlipoca, who apparently signified the primitive and sanguine religious cult of Mexico. The old priesthood who practiced human sacrifice and adhered to a policy of war and destruction resented the peaceful and gentle faith brought by Quetzalcoatl. In the end, Tezcatlipoca, the personification of the sorcerers, contrived to poison the god king, which implies that his doctrines were corrupted by false teachings and interpretations. From the Codex Hamres, Quetzalcoatl as the principal deity of the people of Cholula. The poison worked slowly and insidiously until Quetzalcoatl, realizing that he could not combat successfully the old perverted priesthood, left Tula, ordering his palaces of gold and silver, turquoise and precious stones to be set afire, accompanied by a procession of musicians, youths and maidens bearing flowers, and flocks of singing birds. The old adept journeyed to Cholula, where the Great Pyramid was built in his honor. It was written that the Cholulans deeply admired the great priest because of the purity of his life, the kindliness of his manner, and his doctrines of peace and brotherhood. He remained with them for nearly 20 years, slowly sickening from the poison which was destroying his body. At last he realized that his ministry was coming to an end, so he continued his long journey towards the mysterious city of Tuaplan, from which he had come. He turned towards the east and proceeded to the sea, which he reached at a point a few miles south of Veracruz. Here he blessed the 4 young men who had accompanied him and bade them return to their homes, with his promise that one day in the future he would return and restore his kingdom among them. Then the old and weary man called to the sea, and out of the waters came a raft of serpents. He stepped upon this strange craft, and was carried away into the land of the sun's beginning. He left behind him a priesthood that perpetuated with esoteric rites the mysteries of the feathered serpent. There is every indication that the cult of Quetzalcoatl was kept secret, a precaution necessary in the face of the opposition of the primitive indigenous sects. There are several accounts of the death or departure of Quetzalcoatl. The conflict is due in part to the legends being derived from different tribes, and in part to the Spanish methods of gathering the reports. These invaders took slight interest in the native traditions until they had destroyed most of the available sources of information. Later, even the converted Indians were uncertain of their tribal history. There is reason to believe, however, that some sacred records were intentionally suppressed and were never available to the missionaries. The people of Mexico claim to have sacred accounts of the mysteries of their religion and the origin of their race. There is mention of the divine book written by Quetzalcoatl, a wise man or wizard, whose name means Lord of the Great Hand. This was supposed to contain the account of the migration of the Aztecs from Asia. Baron de Waldeck claimed that the book had once been in his possession. De Bourbourg thought it was the Dresden Codex, and Bustamante wrote that native historians had a copy in their possession at the time of the fall of Mexico. There is good probability that manuscripts of great value survived the Spanish colonial period and are still available to certain qualified persons. From an original photograph. Augustus Le Plongeon, the archaeologist, is shown seated among the head of feathered serpents, which he discovered in the ruins of Chichen Itza. Augustus Le Plongeon, known to the Yucatecans as Great Blackbeard, was one of the few Americanists to be accepted into the confidence of the ever-reticent Indians. They told him enough to convince a thoughtful man of the existence of esoteric schools in the Mayan area, that sacred mysteries, writes Le Plongeon, have existed in America from times immemorial. There can be no doubt. Even setting aside the proofs of their existence that we gather from the monuments of Uxmal and the descriptions of the trials of initiation related in the sacred book of the Quiches, we find vestiges of them in several other countries of the Western continent. The rites and ceremonies of initiation were imparted in Peru by the ancestors of Manco Capaca, the founder of the Inca dynasty, who were colonists from Central America, as we learn from an unpublished manuscript written by a Jesuit father, Red Anelo Oliva, at the beginning of the year 1631 in Lima, and now in the library of the British Museum in London. A number of authors who tried to prove that Quetzalcoatl was a foreigner who, reaching the shores of the New World at an early time, attempted the civilization of the Aboriginal tribes. Lord Kingsborough favored the possibility that this wanderer was the Apostle Thomas, and that the ancient Central American Indians came under Christian or Jewish influence. Always deeply concerned with the possibilities of linking the worship in the Americas with the religion of the Near East, his lordship writes, the Messiah is shadowed in the Old Testament under many types, such as those of a lion, a lamb, a rue, the morning star, or the planet Venus, otherwise called Lucifer, the sun, light, a rock, a stone, the branch, the vine, wine, bread, water, life, the way. And he is there recognized in the triple character of a king, a priest, and a prophet. It is very extraordinary that Quetzalcoatl, whom the Mexicans believed equally to have been a king, a prophet, and a pontiff, should have also been named by them Quetzalcoatl, or the morning star, also thus, or light, Mexitli, or the vine. For Torquemada said that the core of the aloe, from which the Mexicans obtained wine, was called Votan, or the heart, metaphorically signifying life, and the following, for his body made of dough was eaten by the Mexicans. Las Casas, quoting Padre Francisco Hernandez, says that an old Yucatecan described the ancient religion of his people thus: that they recognized and believed in God who dwells in heaven, and that this God was Father and Son and Holy Spirit, and that the Father was called Icona, who had created men and all things, and that the Son was called Bacab, and that he was born of a virgin called Chiberinus, who is in heaven with God. The Holy Spirit they termed the following: the son Bacab was scourged and crowned with thorns and was tied upon a cross with extended arms, where he died. But after 3 days he arose and ascended into heaven to be with his Father. Dr. Alexander, who reports this story in his book, is inclined to feel that it is confused and probably distorted by the Spanish recorder. On the other hand, the universal distribution of the basic theme may be explained another way. Among the Lacandones, Quetzalcoatl is still represented as a snake with many heads. There is an account that this snake was killed and eaten at times of great national peril, especially at eclipses, which were regarded as portents of disaster. It was believed by the Mayans that Kulkulkan descended invisibly from the sky and personally received the offerings during certain great festivals held in his honor. For details, consult the Mythology of All Ages, Volume 11, Latin America, by Hartley Burr Alexander. Daniel Britton, in his Essays of an Americanist, devoted some thought to the magical powers attributed to the priest of Central America. He mentioned Father Beza and an English priest, Thomas Gage, who reported cases of sorcerers transforming themselves into animals and performing miracles. De Bourbourg was not entirely convinced that ventriloquism, animal magnetism, or the tricks familiarly employed by conjurers explain the mysteries of Nagualism, as the black art of these Indians is called. Brenton quotes from the Popul Vuh: "Truly this Gucamax, or Quetzalcoatl, became a wonderful king. Every 7 days he ascended to the sky, and every 7 days he followed the path to the abode of the dead. Every 7 days he put on the nature of a serpent, and he became truly a serpent. Every 7 days he put on the nature of an eagle, and again of a tiger, and he became truly an eagle and a tiger." It is evident from available authorities that the Mayans and Aztecs had an extensive body of legendary and lore, which originated in the mysteries of their religions and proved the existence of an elaborate system of secret rites and ceremonies. In the form of a feathered snake, Quetzalcoatl overshadowed a dynasty of rulers and priests, some of whom later assumed his name and even his mask symbol. These Quetzalcoatls have been confused, like the several Zoroasters of Persia, into one person, with the resulting conflict in dates. Recent excavations would indicate that the cult of the feathered serpent was established before the beginning of the Christian era and did not arise in the 10th or 11th century AD, as held by some modern archaeologists. It is more likely that the ancient hero was said to have been reborn or to have overshadowed a later leader of the nation. All the accounts imply that the religious order which served the mysteries of Quetzalcoatl was long established. Those who followed in the way which he had prescribed lived most severe lives. Children were consecrated to his temples from their birth and were marked by a special collar. At the end of the 2nd year, the child was scarified in the breast. When it was 7 years old, it entered a seminary where it took vows, covering personal conduct and public duties, including prayer for the provisions of its family and its nation. There are many of these priestly brotherhoods, and the Spanish missionaries, in spite of their theological prejudices and intolerances, were forced to admit that the Aztec priests were excellent scholars and lived austere and pure lives. It was said of these missionaries that, in Quetzalcoatl, who taught charity, gentleness, and peace, they thought they saw a disciple of Jesus Christ. The king of the Mexican nations, like those of ancient Egypt, were also initiates of the state mysteries. Torquemada described the attainments of Nazahualpili, the king of Texcoco. This learned man gathered about him masters of the sciences and arts, and gained a wide reputation as an astrologer and seer. When Montezuma was elected to rule over the complex of Nahuatlan nations, King Nazahualpili stood before the young man and congratulated the entire nation for having selected such a ruler, whose deep knowledge of heavenly things ensured to his subjects his comprehension of those of an earthly nature. The interpreter of the collection of Mendoza described Montezuma as, by nature wise, as astrologer and philosopher, and skilled and generally versed in all the arts, both in those of the military as well as those of civil nature. And from his extreme gravity and state, the monarchy under his sway began to verge towards empire. The great serpent clothed in Quetzal plumes certainly belonged to another race, and came from an unknown country. Lucien Biart says, "It is an incontestable fact that Quetzalcoatl created a new religion based upon fasting, penitence, and virtue, in skillful trades and in metalworking. This Amerindian savior reminds one of the craftsman of Tyre who cast the ornaments for Solomon's temple, as a benefactor of his people, as a liberator of men's minds and hearts. This Nahuatlan demigod certainly revealed the attributes of the master builder." Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Rosies. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.